Heather Thompson's voice sliced through the hushed calm of the first-class cabin like a thunderclap. "Move now," she snapped, arms folded across her crisp uniform. "I need these seats for our Diamond members." Emma Monroe froze mid-seatbelt buckle, chest tightening. Across the aisle, Henry's elbow brushed hers. A soft ding echoed as Henry's phone lit up. He'd just gone live. The entire cabin seemed to hold its breath. On the seatback screen before Emma, the in-flight entertainment display flickered to life. Collins, Family Live, 1,200 viewers and counting. Passengers exchanged puzzled glances. The woman in burgundy paused in mid-sip. The businessman in row 1 lowered his newspaper. Even Heather's perfectly poised composure wavered. Emma's pulse quickened, but she forced herself to inhale slowly. Despite the adrenaline rushing through her veins, she reminded herself of their plan. Tonight was about more than confronting a prejudiced flight attendant. It was about proving that respect isn't granted by uniform or status, but earned through composure and courage. Henry slipped a slender USB drive from his blazer pocket and plugged it into the console port beside his seat. The screen went black for a heartbeat, then sprang back to life with a bold message. "Live at 30,000 feet. Witness what happens when prejudice boards first class." The viewer count spiked by hundreds in seconds. A soft murmur rippled through the cabin as phones were raised to record the screens. Emma stole a glance at Henry's confident profile. He exuded a quiet determination that steadied her. Heather took a step forward, clipboard raised like a shield. "Can you two stop whatever you're doing and move to the back?" she demanded, jaw clenched. The cabin lights dimmed to a warm glow. The engines rumbled to life. Overhead bins clicked shut. All eyes were on Emma and Henry. Emma eased back in her seat, smoothing the lapel of her ivory blouse. Beneath the seat in front of her rested a small gold-wrapped box. Grandma Eleanor's birthday present. An heirloom locket inside. It felt heavy with promise, and suddenly she saw it as a symbol not only of family love, but of their quiet rebellion tonight. Henry caught her eye and gave a barely perceptible nod. He tapped out a caption on his phone. "You're watching history in the making. Het equality in the air." The post instantly went live on their private Collins family channel and on the company's internal social feed, sending ripples through both social spheres. Heather squared her shoulders, her well-worn poise cracking. "You're disrupting the flight," she hissed. "You have no right to broadcast." Before she could finish, the intercom crackled, and every screen, the seatbacks, phones, tablets, shifted to a live feed of their CEO's office. Bold white letters crawled across the bottom. "Urgent. Watch CEO Richard Monroe respond live." The cabin's tension ratcheted another notch. Emma felt Henry's hand brush hers as he set his phone aside. "Stay calm," he murmured. Emma nodded, her fingers brushing the edge of the gift box like an anchor. She could feel the collective attention of 20 affluent passengers, plus the entire connected world, zeroing in on her small act of defiance. A deep, resonant voice filled the cabin. "This is Richard Monroe." The CEO's calm tone echoed through every speaker and screen. "I'd like to repeat that directive." Emma's breath caught. She leaned forward to hear the command, every nerve alive with anticipation. Outside the cabin's wide windows, the tarmac lights flickered past as the Boeing 777 rolled toward the runway. Inside, Emma and Henry remained seated, dignified and unbowed. The captain's announcement came through the intercom moments later. "Ladies and gentlemen, prepare for takeoff. Cabin crew, please secure the cabin." As the engines rose to a steady roar, Emma met Henry's gaze. The gold-wrapped box in front of her caught the soft overhead light, glinting like a beacon. She allowed herself a small, triumphant smile. Their plan had worked. They'd transformed a silent moment of humiliation into a powerful demonstration of accountability. Heather Thompson stood rigid by the galley, clipboard forgotten at her side. The cabin crew snapped into position with a new edge of respect. aware that their senior supervisor was under unseen scrutiny, and that she'd misjudged two composed teenagers whose names carried consequences. Emma's heart still thumped with the rush of those first 30 seconds, but it had settled into a steady rhythm. This was what she and Henry had rehearsed. To endure the initial shock, to seize control through a single, strategic power move, and to let the truth speak for itself. She glanced at Henry one last time before the plane lifted into the night sky. His quiet strength gave her confidence that the real journey, the one proving that integrity holds more power than any badge, had only just begun. And as the cabin lights dimmed for final ascent, Emma pressed her hand gently against the box. For the Monroe siblings, this overnight flight was no longer just a birthday celebration. It was the moment they stood firm, rewrote expectations, and reminded a world watching and listening that true authority belongs to those who lead with dignity and heart. As the gentle hum of the engine settled into a steady purr, the cabin lights softened to a warm glow that bathed the first-class section in muted gold. Emma leaned into her seat and exhaled, a quiet sigh of relief. The initial chaos had passed, and for now, the aircraft soared smoothly above the clouds. She pressed her fingers to the lapel of her ivory blazer, smoothing a stray thread near the collar. Each movement was deliberate, an exercise in composure after a stormy opening act. Henry sat beside her, his posture relaxed yet alert, shoulders squared against the cream leather cushion. He reached into his blazer pocket and pulled out the small gold-wrapped gift box they'd carried through security. He placed it gently on his lap, its ribbon catching the light like a beacon. Henry's dark eyes softened for a moment as he thought of their grandmother, Eleanor Collins, waiting at home. The gift wasn't merely a trinket. It was a token of love, a legacy passed from one generation to the next. Emma watched him from the corner of her eye. Henry carried himself with an effortless dignity, an inherited trait from their family's long lineage of quiet influence. She remembered how, growing up in their townhouse on the Upper East Side, Sunday afternoons meant tea with her grandmother and hushed conversations about the airline that Uncle Richard had built from scratch. Back then, Henry had been a shy boy who preferred books to games. Now, at 17, he projected a calm confidence that belied his age. Across the aisle, the flight attendants moved methodically, checking seat belts and overhead bins. The faint aroma of warmed almonds reminded Emma of holiday gatherings at their grandmother's penthouse in Tribeca. In her mind, she could still see the sweeping views of the Hudson River, the sparkling skyline, and the double rows of family photographs lining the walls. That's where they felt most at home, wrapped in the family's legacy of service and discretion. Emma took a breath and turned to Henry. "You okay?" she whispered, not wanting to draw attention. Henry nodded, his dark curls brushing his forehead. "Yeah, better now that we're actually flying." He tapped the gift box with a reassuring smile. "Grandma will love it." Emma's lips curved into a genuine smile at the sight of his calm resolve. She reached for her own in-flight console and dimmed the screen to minimal brightness, restoring a sense of privacy. Even at 30,000 feet, Emma cherished her moments of control. A flight attendant passed by, offering sparkling water in a slender flute. Henry accepted one and raised it in a small toast to Emma. She tapped her glass against his, the clink of crystal unexpectedly comforting. "I still can't believe how fast Heather backed down," Emma said softly, eyes drifting to the window where the stars were just visible against a vast expanse of black. Henry shrugged. "That USB was a good move." He paused, then added, "But I'm proud of how you handled yourself." Emma studied her reflection in the window pane, a young woman with a steady gaze and a tight-lipped smile. She felt a complex swell of emotions, pride in her composure, relief that their plan had worked, and a touch of sadness for Heather Thompson, whose career was now in jeopardy. Emma knew the heartache of losing one's livelihood. It was a reminder that power carried responsibility. Minutes later, a flight attendant returned to serve their first course, a delicate salad of arugula, roasted beets, and goat cheese, drizzled with balsamic reduction. As she placed the dish before Emma, the attendant offered a polite nod and a small, knowing smile, as though acknowledging that tonight's flight was anything but ordinary. Emma and Henry shared the meal in respectful silence, mindful of diet and decorum. Their grandmother had taught them that true influence often spoke not in words, but through measured actions. Each bite was a nod to their upbringing, cultivated, refined, and life guided by principle. Henry dabbed his mouth with a linen napkin and leaned back. "Tell me again why Grandma wanted us on this flight," he said with a playful tilt of his head. Emma laughed softly. "She said it's good for us to experience the world, even if it means spending a night slightly above turbulence." She paused. "But she did warn me that nothing flies smoother than a family-owned airline." Henry's gaze flicked to the aisle, where Heather Thompson stood rigid, clipboard in hand, her cheeks still flushed from the earlier confrontation. Emma followed his look. Now that the adrenaline had subsided, she felt a twinge of empathy. Heather had dedicated a dozen years to upholding standards, perhaps a standard too rigid. But Emma's mission wasn't to humiliate Heather beyond repair. It was to redefine respect for everyone on board. Turning back to Henry, she leaned forward in her seat. "We need to be cautious," she said in a low voice. "Our live stream is still up. I've been monitoring comments, mixed reactions, but mostly support." Henry's brow lifted. "You read the comments mid-flight?" Emma shrugged with a grin. "I can't help it. People need validation." He shook his head, but the corners of his mouth twitched upward. "Just remember, we did this for Grandma and for every passenger who's ever felt powerless." Emma nodded, her smile melting into something softer, an undercurrent of purpose. She recognized that this flight represented more than a birthday celebration. It symbolized a stand against quiet injustices that slipped beneath the radar of everyday life. Their household had always emphasized fairness and dignity. Tonight, they were translating those principles into action. A gentle chime echoed through the cabin as the flight attendant collected their empty plates. Emma tucked her napkin onto her lap and shifted in her seat, adjusting the gold locket chain around her neck, a keepsake from Grandma that matched the gift box below. The locket bore an engraving, "Courage above all," a fitting motto for a journey that had already tested their resolve. As the cabin lights dimmed further, the flight attendants began preparing the cabin for a brief period of rest. A hush replaced the earlier tension, as if everyone on board, passengers and crew alike, was processing the evening's events. Emma and Henry returned to their seats, feeling the gentle tilt as the plane climbed to its cruising altitude. Emma exhaled, letting the rhythm of the engines lull her into a contemplative calm. She studied Henry's profile. Strong jawline, calm expression, eyes reflecting the soft glow of overhead lights. He was her partner in this delicate balance between provocation and dignity. "Are you proud of me?" Emma asked quietly. Henry glanced over, his gaze warm. "Always," he replied simply. Emma let the silence of the cabin settle around them. Outside the window, the night sky stretched endlessly, dotted with distant stars. Inside, the gold gift box lay between them like a silent testament to family bonds and quiet power. In that moment, Emma realized that the true luxury of first class wasn't the leather seats or gourmet cuisine. It was the opportunity to assert one's worth with grace, to demand respect not through anger, but through unwavering composure. Henry reached across and squeezed her hand. "Let's get some rest," he said softly. "Tomorrow, there's more to do." Emma nodded, closing her eyes for a moment. She felt the reassuring hum of the engines, the weight of the locket against her chest, and the solidarity of her brother beside her. As sleep beckoned, Emma whispered to herself, "Thank you, Grandma." And in the quiet lull of the cabin, the siblings drifted toward slumber, their hearts buoyed by purpose and the unshakable belief that their next moves would shape not only this flight, but every journey of dignity that lay ahead. The cabin lights glowed softly as Emma flipped through the in-flight magazine, scanning articles on European art galleries and Michelin-starred restaurants in Paris. Henry adjusted the thin blanket draped over his lap and consulted the flight map on a seatback screen, tracing their path across the channel toward New York. Outside, the moonlight shimmered on clouds below, lending an almost dreamlike quality to the hush inside first class. For a moment, everything felt serene, until Heather Thompson re-entered the aisle. She emerged from the galley with that same precise stride Emma had noticed before, heels clicking, shoulders squared, clipboard in hand. The entire cabin sensed her approach. Conversations hushed, eyes lifted from screens and newspapers. Emma felt her pulse stutter. "Excuse me," Heather began, voice low but edged with ice. She planted herself directly in front of Emma's row, clipboard pressing against her hip. Emma closed the magazine with a soft snap, breath-catching. Emma, softly, to herself. "Here we go again. Have you ever been stopped just by someone's look?" "Yes, ma'am," Emma replied, forcing calm into her tone. Heather's pursed lips curved into almost a smirk. She leaned down so everyone could hear. "I'm concerned. Your passes say first class, but your outfits, they're not what I'd expect for our premium guests." She tapped the laminated ticket in Emma's hand. "Your seats are being requested for other passengers." The words landed like stones. A hush fell. The man 2 rows back paused his podcast. The woman in burgundy set down her wine glass. And even the toddler near the window clutched his stuffed elephant tighter. Henry sat motionless beside Emma, jaw clenched, eyes flicking between Heather's impassive face and Emma's. Emma pressed her lips together. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but our passes are valid," she said, lifting the ticket. Her voice wavered only slightly. "We were assigned these seats at boarding." Heather ignored the explanation. She straightened, clipboard snapping shut. "This cabin is for paying Diamond members," she announced, voice carrying through the rows. "There's a gentleman in row 9 who has Diamond Plus status and has requested priority seating. You 2 may accompany me to the back of the plane. What would you do if someone tried to move you from your rightful place?" Emma felt her cheeks flush. Pride and indignation warred inside her. She met Henry's gaze. His eyes were steady, the faintest nod telling her they must stand their ground or risk everything. She drew in a measured breath and said, "Ma'am, we have every intention of flying in first class. If there's an issue, perhaps you can verify with the captain." Heather's jaw tightened. She gave Emma a long once-over, as if weighing Emma's worth. Finally, she tapped her badge, a silver emblem denoting 12 years of service. "I assure you, I am more than capable of enforcing airline policy," she replied, voice icy. "Now move. Let me know if you've ever held your ground when someone underestimated you." Emma sat back, heart pounding. Henry's fingers unfurled from her armrest as he leaned forward. "We're not moving," he said, voice low but firm. "These tickets were issued by your own system. Unless the captain orders it, we'll remain here." A ripple of tension passed through the cabin. Emma felt every passenger's gaze, some tense with curiosity, others shaded with empathy. The older woman in a tweed jacket near the window met Emma's eye and offered a barely perceptible nod of solidarity. Emma swallowed hard, bolstered by silent support. Heather's eyes narrowed. She raised her voice another notch. "That's not how this works. I can have you escorted." "Please don't," Emma interrupted, voice stronger now. She pressed her back against the seat, recalling Grandma Eleanor's words. "Always hold your head high, but let your integrity speak louder than your fear." Emma lifted her chin. "We won't make a scene, but we won't leave either." Henry sat up straighter, accentuating the firmness in his posture. "It's not our choice to host a scene," he added. "But it's your decision whether to escalate." Heather's lips parted, but then she closed them. For a heartbeat, the cabin fell into suffocating silence, broken only by the hum of the engines. Emma felt sweat bead at her hairline, the gold-wrapped gift box under the seat glinting like a silent witness. At that moment, a flight attendant named Claire stepped around Heather's elbow. Claire was new. Emma had seen her offering extra blankets earlier. Now Claire's expression was guarded, conflicted. She glanced at Emma and Henry, then at Heather, hesitation flickering. "Miss Thompson," Claire began, voice gentle. Heather waved her off. "Not now, Claire." Claire nodded, retreating but shooting Emma a sympathetic look. Emma's chest filled with gratitude and resolve. They were not alone. Heather cleared her throat and consulted her clipboard for another justification. Instead, she caught sight of the seatback screen flickering with Henry's live stream. Collins, Family Live, 2,300 viewers. Heather's eyes widened. Emma felt a surge of hope. Instead of confronting the screen, Heather's jaw clenched. She turned back to Emma. "You'll regret this," she hissed just loud enough. Then, without another word, she stalked back toward the galley, heels snapping. The cabin released a collective exhale. Passengers resumed hushed conversations, casting glances that mixed curiosity and approval. Emma pressed her hand to Henry's arm. "Thank you," she whispered. Henry exhaled, tension easing. "We did the right thing." Emma let the magazine drop in her lap. The wind of conflict had swept through first class, leaving behind a charged mood. She glanced at the live stream. Viewer count climbing. Comments like, "Stand your ground." "Family first." "Prejudice has no place at 30,000 feet." Emma realized how carefully they'd orchestrated tonight's events. The gift box, the live stream, the measured defiance. But this first act of humiliation, Heather's cold demand, would fuel the rest of the journey. It was a reminder of why they'd boarded, to confront quiet injustices and test the power of dignity. Henry caught her eye. "Ready for the next move?" Emma nodded, nerves settling into controlled excitement. "Let's see how far this goes." Above them, the engines droned steadily. The cabin lights dimmed for rest, but Emma felt wide awake. She leaned back, tracing the edge of the gift box hidden beneath her seat, imagining Abigail halfway around the world, sharing this moment. The siblings had weathered the first strike of prejudice. Now they would show that true power lies in standing firm and speaking truth through action. Emma didn't say a word as the cabin lights dimmed farther for rest, but tiny secrets glimmered in her eyes. She leaned back into her seat, sliding her fingertips along the smooth leather armrest as if tracing invisible lines. Around her, the hush of first class wrapped like a velvet cloak. Only the soft whir of the environmental control system and distant murmur of crew voices disturbed the stillness. Henry sat upright beside her, shoulders squared, his gaze fixed on the seatback screen where the live stream comment feed still scrolled in quiet bursts. "Stay strong. We've got your back. Family always wins." Emma's heart swelled at the solidarity. An unseen army of viewers rallying behind two teenagers who refused to be bullied. Yet she gave no outward sign beyond a subtle nod to Henry, emotion so slight only he noticed. Inside Emma, a silent storm raged. She closed her eyes and let memories flutter by. Abigail's delighted squeal when Grandma Eleanor first handed her the locket chain. The way Henry had quietly coached her on maintaining eye contact during tough moments. The taste of that first sip of champagne in this very cabin, untainted by tension. Now, sitting here in twilight hush, she felt both the weight of their mission and its exhilarating promise. A flight attendant glided down the aisle, adjusting the cabin lights and gently tilting a headrest for a passenger ahead. Emma watched the attendant's precise movements and reminded herself of the discipline behind every gesture, hers included. This was no longer about lines on a ticket or the authority of a uniform. It was about the quiet power they wielded by simply refusing to be moved. Henry cleared his throat, low enough to be heard only by Emma. "What do you think your grandmother would say right now?" Emma's eyes fluttered open. She turned and grazed his cheek with her gaze, a silent thank you for his steadfastness. Then she caught her reflection in the small vanity mirror inset near her console. The girl in the reflection didn't look like someone who'd broken protocol. She looked like someone who embodied every lesson Eleanor had taught her: poise, dignity, and unwavering resolve. Outside, The wing cut through a blanket of clouds, ghostly contours lit by moonlight. Emma stared at the wingtip for a long moment, imagining it a brushstroke on a canvas of midnight air. She could almost hear her grandmother's gentle voice. Even in the darkest sky, you must let your own light guide you. A soft chime signaled the end of the rest period. Passengers stirred. Murmurs of awakening swept through the cabin. Emma tensed, anticipating Heather's return. But the aisle remained empty except for the steward collecting empty glasses. Henry leaned back, exhaling. "I think she's gone to the cockpit," he whispered, nodding toward the galley door. Emma offered a small, uncertain smile. "Maybe she's rethinking her life choices." Henry's lips twitched. "Or updating her resume." They shared a quiet laugh, the tension easing just enough to let them breathe. Emma glanced down at the gift box beneath her seat. The gold paper caught a stray beam of light, shimmering like a promise. She inched forward and slid her hand over the ribbon, fingers brushing its silky surface in a gesture both protective and reverent. A hush fell again as a fellow passenger, a silver-haired woman in a tweed jacket, met Emma's eyes across the aisle. The woman offered a slight nod, one eyebrow raised in a question that needed no words. "Are you okay?" Emma lifted her chin, letting a faint, grateful smile curl her lips. She tapped her temple thoughtfully, as if giving the woman a salute of solidarity. The woman's expression softened into a warm, knowing grin. In that simple exchange, Emma felt the breadth of understanding that spanned age and privilege. They were not alone. Henry shifted slightly and touched Emma's hand. "Something's coming," he said quietly. "I can feel it." Emma inhaled, the leather seat cradling her back. Her stomach fluttered with anticipation, part thrill, part trepidation. They had weathered the first attack, and the world had watched. Now, the real test loomed, turning this moment into lasting change beyond any single cabin or live stream. She leaned her head back against the cushion and closed her eyes, inviting calm. Each breath was a deliberate exercise. In, hold, out. She felt the slow pulse of the aircraft beneath her, a steady heartbeat that carried them through the night. In the darkness behind her closed lids, Emma saw a future scene. Abigail's bright face as she received the gift box, Grandma Eleanor's proud glisten in her eyes, and even Heather Thompson's quiet reckoning, an image of a woman forced to confront her own assumptions. A soft ping broke the silence on Emma's console. She opened her eyes to see a private message appear in the Collins. "Family live chat. Proud of you both. Love, Gma." Emma's chest blossomed with warmth. She tapped out a quick emoji heart response, not drawing the cabin's attention, but sealing a personal connection that spanned miles and generations. It was a reminder that this flight, these seats, and even the tension that crackled through the air all traced back to family bonds and shared values. Henry caught sight of the message over her shoulder and offered an approving nod. "That's why we do this," he said softly. Emma reached over and squeezed his hand. "Exactly." They sat in companionable silence as the cabin lights returned to their gentle glow. Around them, the remaining first-class passengers settled into reading or quiet conversation, but Emma and Henry felt an unmistakable shift in energy. What had begun as a single act of defiance had rippled outward, through the cabin, across the live stream, and into the very heart of their family legacy. Emma leaned forward, her gaze drifting again to the gold box on her lap. She felt it vibrate with possibility. Every prepared smile, every silent signal, every breath held and released had led to this point. Ahead lay the moment when authority would speak through intercom waves, and justice would take flight on wings of quiet power. One more subtle gesture. Emma lifted the gift box slightly, angling it toward the ceiling lights so the ribbon caught the light in a soft, dazzling arc. An unspoken declaration that dignity, once ignited, could never be dimmed. And high above the Atlantic nightscape, The two siblings sat poised for their next move, silent but electric. The calm before the storm, reborn as a force no one would soon forget. Emma stirred awake to the soft hum of the engines, the cabin lights still muted for overnight rest. She blinked against the dim glow and found Henry beside her, fully alert. His jaw was set, eyes focused on the galley doorway. He nodded once, as if weighing a silent decision, and then the sound came, the deliberate click of heels on cabin carpeting. Heather Thompson reappeared, clipboard in hand, but this time her stride carried something darker, an unmistakable edge of hostility. Emma's stomach clenched. She sat up fully, tugging lightly on the blanket, ready to meet whatever came next. Heather paused at their row and folded her arms. The hush deepened. Passengers glanced up, some rubbing sleep from their eyes, others simply watching with curiosity. Emma's heart pitched. The first confrontation had rattled tempers. This one felt poised to explode. "Enough games," Heather hissed, voice low but laced with venom. She thrust the clipboard forward. "I'm calling ground security the moment we land. You two will be escorted off the plane, and I'll be filing a formal complaint." Her words struck Emma like a slap. An icy knot formed in Emma's chest. She met Henry's gaze. His eyes reflected the same shock, but also something fiercer, an enough is enough glint that bolstered her resolve. Before Emma could answer, Heather jabbed a finger at the sealed gift box under the seat. "And that," she snapped, voice rising so that it echoed in the hush, "is evidence of your privilege. You think you can buy your way onto any flight you want." A murmur rippled through first class. The silver-haired woman in tweed frowned. The businessman in row 1 lifted an eyebrow. Even the flight attendants paused, glancing at one another with concern. Emma's throat burned with humiliation, but she clamped down on her impulse to react. Instead, she pressed her lips together and kept her gaze level. "That's Mrs. Monroe's gift for Grandma," she said calmly, lifting her chin. "Its value is in sentiment, not dollars." Heather's eyes flared. "Don't lecture me on sentiment," she snarled. "I enforce rules, and tonight you broke them." Henry stood, his blanket slipping from his shoulders. "Ma'am, we've already shown you our valid passes. There was no rule broken." His voice was steady, but the quiet firmness carried the weight of family backing. Henry was no longer just a teenager. He was an heir with the authority of Monroe blood behind him. Heather's breath hitched. For a moment, Emma thought she might falter, but instead, she squared her shoulders and stamped her foot. "You will leave these seats, or face removal upon landing." Emma's fingers curled around the edge of her seat. Her pulse pounded, but she refused to let it show. She drew in a slow, measured breath, recalling every lesson learned in the family's drawing rooms and conference halls. Poise under pressure, strength in silence. "Do what you must," Emma said, voice low but unwavering. "But we'll be staying right here." Heather's face twisted in fury. She stared at Emma for a long, dangerous moment. Then she pivoted and stomped down the aisle, calling over her shoulder, "I've had enough of this insolence." No sooner had she disappeared around the corner than Claire, the junior flight attendant, stepped forward. Her expression was tight with apology. I'm sorry about that," Claire whispered to Emma and Henry. "She's under a lot of pressure." Henry exchanged a glance with Emma. The apology was gracious, but it underscored how deep Heather's resentment ran. Emma managed a small nod. "Thank you," she said softly, recognizing Claire's conflict. As Claire retreated, Emma settled back and exchanged a quick look with Henry. "She's not going to stop," he said quietly. "We need another approach." Emma's chest tightened, but she found a well of calm. "We've made our stand. Now we must let the cockpit speak for us." She reached into her pocket and tapped her phone screen, checking the live stream feed. Viewers had ballooned into the thousands. Comments scrolled with support. "They can't bully them. Justice in the sky. Grandma's pride right there." Henry's lips curved in a faint, wry smile. "Ready when you are." Emma angled her seat back so her console was visible to Heather if she returned. A countdown timer glowed. 2 minutes until CEO intervention. It was a small reminder of the power hovering just out of sight. Seconds later, Heather reappeared, her face pallid, voice trembling. "I've called the cockpit," she spat. "Wait here while they confirm orders." Emma's pulse skipped. Henry reached across and brushed her hand. "Just a moment," he murmured. In the relative quiet that followed, broken only by the rustle of blankets and the distant drone of engines, Emma allowed herself a breath of anticipation. Heather moved to the front of the plane. Clipboard gripped so tight her knuckles whitened. The cabin's tension hit a new peak. Passengers exchanged glances, some raising silent applauds of solidarity. And then, as if on cue, the intercom crackled. A calm, resonant voice filled the cabin. "This is Captain Lawrence. Sorry for the delay. I'm relaying orders directly from headquarters." There was a pregnant pause before the next words. "Senior Cabin Supervisor Heather Thompson is relieved of duty effective immediately. Please remain seated." A collective gasp rippled through the cabin. Heather went pale. Her clipboard fell with a soft thud. Emma felt her heart hammering. This was beyond anything she'd imagined. Passengers erupted into quiet but relieved applause. A steward gently guided Heather to the jump seat in the rear cabin, her uniform already betrayed by shame. Emma and Henry remained seated, holding hands under the armrest, their faces calm but triumphant. Henry leaned close. "We did it," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. Emma pressed his hand. "Yes, we did." She allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. In those moments, the cabin transformed from a battlefield of prejudice into a sanctuary of justice. And at its heart sat two teenagers whose silent courage had forced a reckoning. A wave of relief washed over Emma, but beneath it pulsed a fierce pride. They'd stood firm against a second, more vicious blow, and they'd prevailed not by shouting or anger, but through a composed refusal to surrender their dignity. As the cabin lights brightened for landing, Emma caught the eye of the silver-haired woman in tweed. The woman gave her an approving nod, and Emma returned it with her own quiet gesture, a gentle fingertip placed over her heart. High above the Atlantic nightscape, in the sanctuary of first class, Emma and Henry Monroe had turned prejudice into proof that true power resides in unwavering dignity, and that sometimes the second strike can land even harder than the first, if you're prepared to stand your ground. The cabin lights brightened slightly as the plane leveled off, preparing for the long crossing ahead. Emma leaned back in her seat, the weight of the last confrontation lingering in her chest like a distant echo. Henry sat beside her, fingers intertwined with hers beneath the armrest. All around them, first-class passengers adopted a posture of expectant quiet, an audience awaiting the next act in a drama that had unfolded in real time. Several rows back, the silver-haired woman in tweed rose from her window seat. Her lined face held concern, but her posture was unshakable. Emma recognized her. Mrs. Whitaker, a longtime customer of the Monroe Airline, known for her generous donations to aviation scholarships. Tonight, Mrs. Whitaker had witnessed two defiant teenagers stand their ground, and she was determined to speak up. "Excuse me," Mrs. Whitaker called softly, her voice carrying through the hushed cabin. She stepped forward, leaning on her ornate cane. "Miss Thompson," she addressed Heather, who was standing rigid by the galley, clipboard still in hand. "I've flown this airline for over 20 years. I've never seen passengers treated so unfairly." Emma felt a ripple of solidarity swell among neighboring seats. A trio of executives in tailored suits exchanged uneasy glances. A young couple paused their conversation and turned toward Mrs. Whitaker. A mother gently hushed her toddler. Curiosity piqued. Heather's jaw clenched. "This isn't about length of service," she snapped, voice tight. "This is about enforcing cabin protocol." She turned to Mrs. Whitaker with a hard stare. "I suggest you return to your seat." Mrs. Whitaker's lips pressed into a thin line. She took a small step back, but her gaze never wavered. Emma saw a flicker of admiration pass across several faces, people drawn to Mrs. Whittaker's gentle defiance. Even Claire, the junior flight attendant, hovered at the edge of the galley, torn between loyalty to her supervisor and empathy for Emma and Henry. Claire swallowed and, in a voice barely above a whisper, approached Mrs. Whittaker. "Ma'am, please rest assured, this will be resolved soon." Claire's attempt at reassurance hung in the air like mist. Mrs. Whittaker gave her a quick, grateful nod before turning back to Heather. Emma felt Claire's conflicted expression, a silent plea for mercy for her beleaguered colleague. At that moment, the businessman in row 1, an older gentleman in a navy suit, rose as well. He approached Emma and Henry's row with purposeful steps. His name was Mr. Caldwell, a discreet philanthropist who often contributed to the airline's outreach programs. Emma recalled seeing his name on plaques in the terminal lounge. "Miss Monroe, Mr. Monroe," he began, bowing his head slightly in deference. "Your resolve is inspiring. I believe there's been enough humiliation for one night." He turned to Heather. "Surely we can find an alternative. Those seats are rightfully theirs." Heather flushed, the irony unmissable. She had placed herself in the position of sole arbiter of seating. Now, 2 respected passengers challenged her authority. Emma felt her heart lift at Mr. Caldwell's words. But before Heather could respond, the intercom crackled. Captain Lawrence's calm tones filled the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, apologies for the interruption. We've received updated instructions from headquarters. Please remain seated and enjoy the remainder of your flight." The directive was subtle, but irrevocable. Heather's face paled as she realized the captain wasn't asking. He was stating an order. She looked at her clipboard, then back at Emma and Henry, then at the silent throng of witnesses who had gathered around the aisle. Mrs. Whittaker settled back into her seat, but her eyes remained fixed on Heather. Mr. Caldwell returned to his row, but he turned to Emma and Henry with a polite nod of respect before sinking into his seat. The cabin's atmosphere shifted. The initial shock of confrontation gave way to a quiet camaraderie. Passengers were no longer mere bystanders. They were allies in a stand against injustice. Emma and Henry exchanged a subtle smile, relief mingling with pride. Emma whispered, "They wanted to help. Thank you for calming things." Henry gave a soft nod. "Every voice counts," he murmured. Heather Thompson hovered at the galley threshold, her clipboard dangling at her side like a broken wand. Around her, the cabin crew shared hesitant glances. Even senior attendants paused mid-task, reluctant to disturb the uneasy balance of power. Claire approached again, this time with gentle resolve. "Heather, everything's under control. You should sit down and take a moment." Her voice was soft, carrying the weight of unspoken compassion. Heather's gaze flicked to Claire, then to the silent, expectant passengers. She seemed to search for a foothold, any justification for her earlier behavior, but found none. With a stifled sigh, she allowed Claire to guide her to the rear jump seat. The uniform that had once empowered her now felt like a shackle. In the sudden hush that followed, Emma sensed the tension ebb. The cabin lights dimmed to their soft nighttime setting. Emma and Henry sat together side by side, as though nothing had happened. In form, at least. But beneath that calm surface, the siblings felt the swell of collective energy, the solidarity of every witness, the unspoken promise that wrongs could be righted not by confrontation, but by the courage to stand still. Emma reached under her seat and fingered the edge of the gold-wrapped gift box. It felt warm against her palm, a reminder of why they were here, to honor their grandmother's memory and to uphold values that transcended any one flight. She slipped her other hand into Henry's and gave it a gentle squeeze. A hush of conversation filled the cabin. Passengers returned to their meals, reviews of maps, hushed reflections on what they'd just witnessed. Emma glanced at the shimmering seatback screen. The live stream viewers had surged past 10,000, comments now reading, "This is historic," and "A lesson in grace." She tapped her phone once, pinning a simple reply under the live chat. "Thank you for standing with us." Henry glanced at her with a proud smile. "Looks like Grandma's community is growing by the minute." Emma laughed softly. "And we're only halfway there." In that glow of shared purpose, the siblings sat poised for the next twist, the moment when ultimate authority would close the loop and transform this flight into a landmark of justice. But for now, they basked in the solidarity of silent allies, passengers who had stepped forward, voices that had broken the hush, and a cabin that no longer felt like hostile territory. High above the Atlantic, Emma and Henry Monroe understood that true power often lay not in confrontation but in unyielding composure, and that sometimes it took a chorus of silent witnesses to give strength to a single, resolute stand. A gentle murmur swept through first class like a rising tide. What began as polite glances now rippled into hushed side conversations. Emma sat back, feigning interest in the seatback screen, but she could feel the shift in the cabin's energy, a collective awakening that went beyond their clash with Heather Thompson. It started when Mrs. Whitaker, the silver-haired patron, leaned across to the man beside her. "Did you notice the crest on their boarding passes?" she murmured, pointing discreetly to Emma's laminated ticket, which bore the small, discreet Monroe family emblem. He adjusted his glasses and nodded. "I did, isn't that?" His voice trailed off, replaced by a look of dawning recognition. Across the aisle, Mr. Caldwell tapped his tablet screen, scrolling through an internal company portal. Emma caught his reflection in the window. His expression shifted from polite interest to stunned curiosity. He glanced up, appraising Emma and Henry with new eyes, as if seeing them for the first time. A young couple in the row behind Emma exchanged a quiet sigh. "You think they're related to the CEO?" the woman asked, voice low but urgent. Her partner shrugged. "Could be. The emblem matches the Monroe crest we saw on the in-flight magazine's sponsor page." The cabin felt suddenly smaller, charged with anticipation. Emma felt Henry's hand tighten around hers. He gave her a brief nod. A silent question. "Are they figuring it out?" Emma met Mrs. Whitaker's eye, and the older woman offered a subtle nod of confirmation. Emma could almost taste the collective curiosity blossoming in the air. Not to be outdone, Claire, ever watchful, leaned toward a fellow flight attendant, her voice barely a breath. "That emblem, it's unmistakable. They're the Monroe grandchildren." The attendant's eyes widened. "You mean the airline owner's family?" Claire glanced down the aisle, ensuring Heather was still out of earshot, then exhaled. "Exactly. That's why headquarters is watching this feed." Henry caught Emma's eye and raised an eyebrow. They had known the live stream would spread inside the company, but witnessing crew discussion made the stakes feel immediate. It was no longer a matter of defying a single supervisor. It was an unscripted drama starring the airline's most powerful family members. Emma drew in a breath, steadying herself. The cabin lights glowed softly, but beneath that gentle illumination, she sensed a network of silent alliances forming. Passengers who had felt powerless moments ago now sat with renewed interest, some tapping their phones as if taking mental notes, others whispering about possible outcomes. A soft chime announced the mid-flight service, but food carts rolled down the aisle unseen. Flight attendants moved with practiced courtesy, offering drinks and snacks, but the real spectacle unfolded in the passengers' eyes. Each tray of canapés was accepted with gratitude, yet there was an undercurrent of shared purpose, to witness the next turn in this unfolding story. Emma allowed herself a small smile. They had ignited more than outrage. They had sparked curiosity and solidarity. Yet she and Henry remained composed, projecting calm even as the cabin buzzed. A gentleman in a dark suit, a frequent business flyer Emma recognized from their home roots, leaned forward and cleared his throat. "Miss Monroe, if you don't mind," he began, voice polite but tinged with deference. "Would you confirm your family connection? For context." Emma caught Henry's eye. He gave a subtle nod. "We'll handle this together." Emma turned to the gentleman and offered a courteous smile. "Yes, I'm Emma Monroe, and this is my brother Henry. We're Richard Monroe's grandchildren." Her tone was even, unflustered. The gentleman inclined his head. "Thank you. I'm honored to meet you." He returned to his seat, but his gaze remained fixed on Emma for a moment longer, a quiet gesture of respect. That single confirmation set off another wave of murmurs, questions about family legacy, the responsibilities of their name, and the unexpected courage of two teens standing up to authority. Even a fashion blogger in the corner lifted her phone, typing out a quick note. "Spotted, Monroe siblings on flight, defying rules with style and integrity." Emma felt a flicker of warmth at the unanticipated support. She pressed her hand against Henry's knee, grateful for his steadfastness. He smiled back, his dark eyes echoing pride. Heather Thompson chose that moment to re-emerge from the galley, clipboard in hand, her face flushed with determination. She strode toward Emma's row, intending perhaps to reassert control. But as she moved past Mr. Caldwell, she encountered a wall of silent, unwavering stares. Passengers still processing the Monroe reveal. Heather faltered for a heartbeat, uncertainty flashing in her eyes. Emma sensed the pivot point. The next words Heather uttered would either regain authority or confirm her misjudgment. Heather's hand tightened on her clipboard. Then she inhaled, as if rallying herself. But before Heather could speak, the intercom crackled again. This time, it wasn't the captain. It was a direct patch from the corporate office. A calm but authoritative voice echoed, "Attention cabin crew. The Monroe grandchildren are to remain in first class. Any further escalation will be handled at the destination. Enjoy the rest of your flight." The monolithic weight of that message resonated in every corner of the cabin. Heather's shoulders slumped, her authority undercut by a voice no one dared defy. Emma felt the hush lift into a wave of quiet triumph. Passengers exchanged glances filled with relief and admiration. Mrs. Whitaker offered Emma a gentle nod. Claire exhaled, her face softening in compassion. Even the fashion blogger pocketed her phone, eyes shining with approval. Emma and Henry shared a knowing look. They had provoked suspicion, revealed their identities, and watched as the cabin transformed from adversarial ground into a zone of unspoken unity. The moment of doubt, Chapter 7's spark of suspicion, had fully ignited. In that charged stillness, Emma allowed herself a private thought. This is what courage looks like. She felt the weight of their family crest, not as a privilege to be wielded, but as a mantle to be honored with integrity. Henry brushed a loose curl from Emma's face, his gesture tender yet resolute. "We'll never forget this night," he murmured. Emma met his gaze, her own reflecting the cabin's glow and a fierce pride. "Neither will they," she said softly. Above them, the Boeing 737 carved through the star-speckled sky, a silent witness to a quiet revolution in first class. And in the hush of shared understanding, Emma and Henry Monroe sat poised. Not simply as passengers, but as architects of a moment when suspicion blossomed into solidarity, and when the truth of their heritage proved more powerful than any uniform or rule ever could. A hush settled over first class as the cabin lights dimmed to their evening glow. Emma's fingers toyed with the ribbon of the small gold-wrapped box beneath her seat, her heart still thrumming from the cascade of solidarity they'd witnessed. Around her, the passengers, once silent bystanders, had become silent allies. The air vibrated with quiet energy, like the moment before an orchestra's first note. Henry leaned close, voice barely above a whisper. "They know something's coming." Emma nodded, meeting Mrs. Whitaker's gaze across the aisle. The older woman's nod was almost imperceptible, but her eyes shone with anticipation. Emma drew in a breath and straightened in her seat. Tonight, they would see just how far their family's influence could travel, without them ever leaving their seats. A gentle chime pinged through the intercom. The flight attendant paused in the aisle, glass of water paused mid-air. Even Heather Thompson, standing rigid by the galley, looked up. The cabin fell into a potent silence. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Emma felt the cabin shift on its axis. She exchanged a glance with Henry. His eyes were wide, pupils bright with expectation. Emma clutched the armrest as the voice continued. A brief announcement. I've just received word from headquarters. Due to circumstances beyond standard protocol, we will be remaining at our current altitude for a few extra minutes. A murmur began. Passengers leaned toward one another. Emma caught fragments. Circumstances beyond protocol. Extra minutes. Her pulse quickened. This was no routine flight adjustment. It was a prelude to something far more consequential. Then the captain's tone changed, becoming quieter, more personal. And to clarify, the passengers in row 2 will remain in their seats. Any further inquiries should be directed to Mr. Richard Monroe. Emma's breath hitched. She turned to Henry, eyes wide. He simply nodded. No doubt remained. A beat passed, then a low, resonant voice filled the cabin. This is Richard Monroe. The name cut through the cabin like a spotlight. Emma felt a collective intake of breath. Heads swiveled. Mouths hung slightly open. The voice was calm, measured, unmistakably familiar. The same voice that had lulled her to sleep countless nights during childhood visits to their family estate. I understand there's been a misunderstanding regarding seating assignments and appropriate conduct. Emma pressed her hand over her heart. Her chest felt like it might burst. Henry sat up straighter, jaw clenched, eyes locked on the nearest speaker. The passengers around them sat frozen, riveted by the sound. I'd like to remind everyone that these young people are my grandchildren. Their seats are valid, their behavior has been exemplary, and any further disruption will be addressed upon landing. A wave of relief washed through the cabin. Emma saw Heather's clipboard tremble in her hands, her composed facade crumbling for the first time that night. Passenger after passenger relaxed into their seats, some exchanging triumphant glances, others reaching for their phones to capture the moment. Miss Thompson, the voice continued, you are relieved of supervisory duties for the remainder of this flight. Please sit down and allow your colleagues to carry on. Emma felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, not of sadness, but of vindication. She glanced at Henry, whose normally stoic face was illuminated by pride. They had done this together, a duo of unwavering resolve that no uniform, no protocol, no prejudice could dislodge. A round of quiet applause rippled through first class, gentle but unmistakable. Emma looked to Mrs. Whitaker, who raised her trembling hand in a soft salute. Emma tapped her own temple in return, a subtle nod honoring the veteran passenger's courage. Claire, the junior flight attendant, approached Heather with a bottle of water. Heather accepted it with shaking hands, eyes downcast. The cabin crew moved with renewed respect, offering blankets and refreshments to Emma and Henry with discreet courtesy. As Heather sank into the rear jump seat, Emma allowed herself a small, triumphant exhale. She leaned into Henry's side, her shoulder brushing his. He reached over and squeezed her hand, an unspoken, "well done," passing between them. In the sudden calm, the seat-back screen switched off the in-flight map and returned to standard entertainment. But everyone's attention remained fixed on the siblings. Emma spotted a fashion blogger discreetly typing a selfie caption. Just witnessed the CEO shut down bias at 30,000 feet. And a businessman sending a congratulatory email to his corporate contacts. The ripple effect was already underway. Emma closed her eyes for a moment, letting the impact of the reveal settle in her chest. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. True leadership whispers rather than shouts. Tonight, that whisper had echoed across a cabin full of strangers, uniting them in a conviction that respect and dignity transcend any uniform or title. Henry tapped Emma's arm. You okay? Emma opened her eyes, smiling through a sheen of happy tears. I've never felt more alive. Henry grinned. Grandma's going to be thrilled. Emma nodded, returning her gaze to the gold-wrapped box at her feet. That simple gift, wrapped with care, symbolized so much more now: love, legacy, and the quiet power of standing firm in one's truth. A gentle cough came from a nearby passenger. Emma turned and offered a gracious nod. He returned it with a smile that spoke volumes of solidarity. Ever witnessed justice unfold in the most unexpected place? Let me know in the comments below. The cabin settled into an uneasy calm after the thunderbolt of Richard Monroe's intercom directive. First class returned to its routine: blankets draped over laps, magazines fluttering open, and delicate clinks of glassware as passengers refreshed their drinks. Yet beneath that veneer of normalcy, a taut undercurrent pulsed. Heather Thompson's final attempt at asserting control. Heather sat stiffly in the rear jump seat, her clipboard resting untouched on her lap. The polished brass of her winged badge seemed to mock her as it caught the dim light. Emma and Henry exchanged a glance across the aisle. Henry's lips curled into a small, encouraging smile, while Emma felt a quiet warmth of vindication. They allowed themselves a brief breath of relief. They had won the battle for their seats, but the war for respect, it seemed, was not yet over. Heather's dark eyes flicked from one passenger to the next, as though searching for a spark of rebellion she could snuff out. Gathering herself, she rose, each deliberate movement betraying a simmering rage, and crossed the width of the cabin. Passengers instinctively parted, offering her a path as though she were royalty on a poisoned throne. She halted at Emma's row, clipboard clutched like a shield. Her voice, when it came, was low and trembling, laced with fury and desperation. "You may think this is over," she began, tone dangerously calm, "but I will not stand by and let two teenagers sully the reputation of this airline." A ripple of discomfort spread through the cabin. Mrs. Whitaker leaned back, disapproval etched on her lined face. Mr. Caldwell folded his arms, eyes sharp with impatience. Emma recognized the gravity in their expressions. Heather was about to strike again. Emma's chest tightened, but she sat tall. She offered Heather a polite, cool nod. "We only wanted fair treatment, Ms. Thompson," she replied evenly. "Our seats were paid for, our tickets valid. Nothing was sullied." Heather's lips parted in a sneer. She jabbed a finger at the gift box under Emma's seat. "That box," she spat, voice rising, "is proof of your arrogance, parading your privilege for all to see. You think wealth buys you respect. You think your name erases every rule." Gasps fluttered through the cabin. A flight attendant paused mid-step, brace of champagne flutes in hand. Heather's words hung in the air, heavy as stones. Henry rose to his feet, shoulders squared, voice calm but unyielding. "Your judgment is clouded by prejudice," he said, stepping forward. "Our privilege doesn't trump policy, but policy doesn't excuse discrimination either." Heather's nostrils flared. She leaned closer, eyes blazing. "You—" she began, but a sudden crackle from the crew's headset cut her off. A voice, familiar, calm, crackled through Heather's earpiece. "Ms. Thompson, proceed to your seat immediately. A corporate representative needs to review your conduct." Heather's face paled, but her defiance hardened like steel. She threw back her head and laughed, a brittle, humorless sound. "You can't scare me with corporate doublespeak," she barked, glancing around. "I've upheld these standards for 12 years. I don't need lectures from spoiled kids or their CEO grandpa." Emma's heart sank at the cutting finality of Heather's blow, but she steadied herself. She'd rehearsed this moment of righteous stillness. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat, centered her breath, then met Heather's glare head-on. "We never asked for lectures," Emma said quietly. "We asked for respect." At that, a palpable shift rippled through the cabin. Passengers who had been silent witnesses now felt the weight of Heather's insult and the power of Emma's measured response. The woman in burgundy tapped her champagne flute against her glass, soft but insistent, as if to punctuate Emma's words. The businessman in row 1 adjusted his cufflinks and offered Emma a small, sympathetic nod. Heather stiffened. realization flickering in her eyes. This final outburst had backfired spectacularly. Instead of cowing her opponents, she had rallied an entire cabin behind them. Her last defiance had laid bare her prejudice for everyone present to see, far more revealing than any policy violation could ever be. She swallowed hard, her face drained of color. The once imposing figure seemed to shrink. Emma felt a surge of compassion. Compassion for a woman who'd fallen so far from her own pedestal. Before Heather could muster another retort, the intercom crackled again, this time in the gentle tone of Captain Lawrence. "Ms. Thompson, please return to your jump seat. We will address this matter upon landing. This is your final warning." Heather's mouth snapped shut. She cast one last, furious glance around the cabin, at the passengers whose eyes now bore no trace of deference, and then turned on her heel. Her heels clicked hollowly as she retreated, clipboard forgotten in her hand. The moment Heather disappeared behind the curtain was met with a collective exhale. Passengers resumed their hushed conversations, but the air remained charged. Emma and Henry sank back into their seats, side by side, hands still intertwined. They had weathered the final storm. A soft applause broke out, gentle, respectful, unanimous. Emma glanced at Mrs. Whitaker, whose proud smile shone in the soft light. Mr. Caldwell raised his glass in a quiet toast. Even Claire, the junior attendant, allowed herself a subtle smile before hurrying down the aisle to resume her duties. Emma pressed her hand to her chest, feeling the imprint of her locket. The gold-wrapped gift box beneath her seat seemed to glow with warmth, a symbol of love that had carried her through the night's trials. Henry leaned close. "You never gave in," he murmured. Emma exhaled, a soft laugh shaking her shoulders. "Neither did you," she replied. In the hush that followed, Emma allowed herself a moment of victory, not a triumphant roar, but a quiet acknowledgement that dignity had won the day. High above the dark Atlantic, in the hushed sanctum of first class, two teenagers had stood unbowed against prejudice. And in that final strike of defiance, Heather Thompson had unwittingly sealed her own downfall. As the engines hummed steadily toward their destination and the cabin crew prepared for landing, Emma and Henry sat regally in their seats, their composure unbroken, their legacy of respect shining brighter than any insult could ever dim. Emma's pulse drummed as the cabin lights dimmed into their evening glow, an almost imperceptible cue that the moment they'd been waiting for was imminent. Henry sat beside her, fingers drumming thoughtfully against the armrest. They'd weathered Heather Thompson's first blow, faced down her second surge of prejudice, and watched as their fellow passengers quietly rallied to their side. Now, the air thrummed with anticipation. From the front, the soft footfalls of flight attendants folding blankets and stowing service carts faded into the background. Emma lifted her chin, eyes trained on the nearest speaker. Her heart fluttered at the memory of childhood visits to Grandma's estate, where she had fallen asleep to the deep timbre of her grandfather's voice. Tonight, that same voice would speak again, this time carrying the full weight of Monroe authority. The intercom hissed to life. "Ladies and gentlemen," the calm, resonant voice began. "This is Richard Monroe, calling from New York headquarters." A collective intake of breath swept through first class. Emma felt her breath catch, her grip on Henry's hand tightening. He offered her a reassuring nod. Steady anchor points in a sea of suspense. "I've been monitoring tonight's events," Richard continued, "and I want to thank you all for your patience. However, Ms. Thompson's conduct has violated not only our policy, but the very principles upon which this airline was founded." Emma felt her chest swell with pride. The soft click of Heather's heels echoed from the rear jump seat. Heather had risen, clutching the armrests as though bracing herself. "Effective immediately," Richard's voice declared. "Senior Cabin Supervisor Heather Thompson is relieved of duty. She will be escorted to administration upon landing, and her record will reflect this suspension pending further review." Heather's posture crumpled. Emma watched as the clipboard slipped from Heather's trembling hands, clattering softly against the jump seat. The cabin's tension erupted into quiet, respectful applause. Handfuls of discreet clapping that resonated with genuine approval. A steward moved toward Heather with discreet solemnity, guiding her away from the jump seat. Heather's uniform, once a symbol of pride, suddenly looked heavy and alien. Heather's cheeks were pale, her eyes flicked toward Emma and Henry, a torrent of regret and humiliation in her gaze. Emma swallowed, her own emotions a swirl of vindication and empathy. She recalled the countless nights she'd sat with Grandma Eleanor, learning that true leadership was born from compassion, not just authority. Tonight, that lesson resonated like never before. Richard paused, allowing the gravity of his words to settle. "Let tonight be a reminder," he resumed, "that respect is neither inherited nor purchased. It is earned through kindness and fairness. My grandchildren have demonstrated that with quiet courage." Henry's chest puffed with pride. He offered Emma a small, triumphant smile. Emma returned it, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. In that moment, she felt the full circle of their journey, from tentative passengers to agents of justice. Passengers exchanged quiet nods, murmurs of support drifting across rows. Mrs. Whitaker leaned forward, her lined face alight with approval. Mr. Caldwell raised his glass in a discreet toast. Claire, the junior attendant, hovered nearby, her expression a blend of relief and compassion. Heather Thompson was escorted past them, her head lowered, footsteps echoing like a dirge. For a heartbeat, Emma felt a pang of sorrow, for a woman whose years of service had been undone in minutes. But she also knew that unchecked prejudice left deeper scars. This call had restored balance. The intercom clicked off. The cabin lights brightened slightly, signaling the end of the announcement. Emma and Henry sunk back in their seats, their shoulders finally relaxing. Henry whispered, "We did it." Emma pressed her hand against her heart, feeling the gentle throb of joy and resolve. "Yes," she murmured, "we did." High above the Atlantic, in the sacred hush of first class, the defining call had rung out, and with it, a clear message. Dignity and respect would always fly first class. The cabin hummed with restrained energy as the last notes of Richard Monroe's announcement faded. Emma and Henry sat poised in their seats, the soft clink of glassware and the muted rustle of blankets the only sounds beneath the hush. Around them, passengers exchanged glances that spoke volumes. Relief, respect, a shared sense of justice. Heather Thompson emerged from the galley, flanked by a steward and a uniformed security officer. Her stride was unsteady, each step a public admission of defeat. She clutched her clipboard to her chest as though it were armor, but its polished surface reflected only her shame. The cabin lights highlighted the tremor in her hands. As Heather passed row 2, Emma and Henry rose in unison, their posture regal yet compassionate. Emma's gaze met Heather's for a fleeting instant, a silent acknowledgement that, though justice had been served, no one wins without loss. Heather's eyes darted downward, unable to hold the siblings' steady, dignified stare. Passengers reached for their phones. A hush of camera shutters clicked in unison, 30 pairs of lenses capturing the moment Heather Thompson left her post. The recording would ripple far beyond these 8 rows of leather seats, a permanent reminder that authority unchecked can crumble in an instant. Mrs. Whitaker rose to her feet and offered Heather a gentle nod of encouragement. "You did your duty as you saw it," she said softly, voice carrying like a benediction. "Perhaps it's time to learn anew." Heather's shoulders quivered. She didn't respond. The words, though kind, cut deeper than any rebuke. Mr. Caldwell approached Heather as she reached the forward curtain. He offered a half-smile of solidarity and a tissue. "Sometimes we all need a second chance," he murmured. Heather accepted the tissue and looked up, tears brimming in her eyes. For a heartbeat, she seemed poised to speak, but the security officer nudged her gently, and she allowed herself to be guided through the curtain into the crew cabin beyond. The cabin door hissed shut, and a soft cheer rose. an unspoken celebration of fairness restored. Emma and Henry sat, exhaling in unison, as the cabin crew retrieved Heather's fallen clipboard and placed it neatly on the galley counter, a symbolic gesture of closure. Claire, the junior attendant, approached them with 2 glasses of sparkling water. She paused, eyes bright. "Thank you," she whispered. "You've shown me what real leadership looks like." Emma accepted the glass with a grateful nod. Henry offered a warm smile. A steward raised his own glass in a quiet toast. "To the Monroe siblings," he said softly, "for reminding us of the power of dignity." Passengers clinked glasses or offered approving nods. The cabin, once tense with conflict, now felt united in purpose. Emma tapped the gold-wrapped gift box beneath her seat and allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. The box, once merely a token for their grandmother, had become a symbol of resolve and unity. Henry reached across and squeezed her hand, his dark eyes gleaming with pride. Captain Lawrence's voice crackled over the intercom with a gentle warmth. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin our descent soon. Thank you for your patience and for supporting a flight in which fairness prevailed." Emma and Henry exchanged a meaningful glance. They had turned a moment of discrimination into a platform for collective accountability. The cabin dimmed its lights further for descent, but the glow in Emma's chest burned bright. Outside, the runway lights beckoned through oval windows. Inside, first-class passengers huddled in discreet conversation, the shared experience binding them like a secret society of witnesses. Emma leaned back, chest full, and closed her eyes for a moment, savoring the quiet triumph. Tonight, they had shown that the most powerful force isn't volume or rage. It's unwavering dignity. And as the plane glided toward its landing, Emma knew this story would resonate far beyond these 8 rows, a testament to the unshakable power of standing firm in what is right. The wheels of the Boeing 767 kissed the tarmac with a gentle thud, and a collective sigh of relief rippled through first class. Emma and Henry Monroe sat poised, fingers still intertwined, as the cabin lights brightened in anticipation of landing. Every head turned toward the forward curtain, waiting for the next chapter of this unexpected saga to unfold. Moments later, the cabin door opened, and a discreet delegation of corporate executives, security personnel, and media liaisons filed in. At their forefront stood Richard Monroe himself, flanked by the airline's communications director and the head of people and culture. He offered Emma and Henry a proud, affectionate smile before addressing the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard began, voice warm and resonant, "I want to personally thank you all for your patience and support. Tonight, we witnessed something extraordinary. 2 young people standing firmly for respect and dignity. In light of these events, our airline is issuing a formal public statement emphasizing zero tolerance for prejudice of any kind." He paused as cabin crew handed out printed copies of the statement, an unequivocal apology to Emma and Henry, an announcement of mandatory bias awareness training for all employees, and a pledge to review and strengthen passenger rights protocols. The passengers murmured approval. Emma felt a swell of gratitude. This was more than a private vindication. It was systemic change born from their quiet courage. Across the aisle, Mrs. Whitaker dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief, nodding in sober acknowledgement. Henry stood and offered the gift box to the communications director. "For Grandma Eleanor," he said softly, "with thanks for inspiring us to speak up." The director accepted it with a respectful bow, her eyes misty. Captain Lawrence's voice crackled over the intercom one final time. "We appreciate your cooperation on this flight. Welcome to New York. May your next journey be as fair as tonight's landing." Emma and Henry gathered their belongings, the gold box tucked safely under Emma's arm. They rose, tall, composed, and dignified, and began their walk down the aisle. Passengers rose in unison, offering applause so gentle it felt like a standing ovation whispered across soft carpet. Before stepping into the jet bridge, Emma paused and turned to Heather Thompson, who watched from the galley entrance, her uniform now unadorned by badge or clipboard. Emma offered a small, forgiving smile. Heather's lips trembled. She nodded once, understanding that compassion was the final lesson of this flight. At the head of the jet bridge stood a small press contingent and ground staff. Flash bulbs popped discreetly as Emma and Henry emerged, their frames silhouetted by terminal lights. Awaiting them were Grandma Eleanor's warm embrace and an entourage of loved ones, ready to sweep them into congratulations and hugs. Emma rested her head on Eleanor's shoulder and whispered, "We did it." Eleanor's proud laugh was a soft bell in the bustling airport. "You both did more than win a seat," she murmured. "You reminded the world what respect truly means." Henry led his sister toward the waiting car, pausing to glance back at the cabin left behind. In that moment, he saw more than empty seats. He saw a testament to the quiet power two voices can wield. Quick audience check-in. What would you do if you were Emma or Henry? Share your thoughts on standing up for dignity in the comments below.